So when you make that point about people using counterinsurgency techniques in Vietnam and then bringing that back to within the United States, what exactly does that mean? And then how does that fit within or how do prisons fit within that?
Right, right. So, I mean, counterinsurgency as a term, interestingly enough, was introduced by JFK in 1961, if I'm not mistaken. It's a style of warfare that has a long genealogy, right? That's traceable to the Roman Empire, right? But most immediately in 61, it was traceable through French pacification and British pacification efforts. But I wanted to make one point which might resonate with you and the work you do around rebranding, which is that the term counterinsurgency performs a counterinsurgency function through its very circulation. What do I mean by that? I mean that counterinsurgency is largely synonymous with counter-revolutionary warfare. But if you call something revolutionary warfare, you already legitimize it and imply that there is a historical basis for that struggle. And so rather than calling it revolutionary warfare, which would mean that people who are arrayed against it are engaged in counter-revolutionary warfare, they called it counterinsurgency because insurgencies don't sound as legitimate as revolutions, right? So counterinsurgency is already refracted through counter-revolutionary language. But anyway, yeah. The idea is essentially, after World War II, the dominant form of war was no longer between states or empires, right? It was anti-colonial wars that were emerging within states and empires by colonized people who were trying to free themselves from the yoke of colonialism, right? And so that style of war and that demand necessitated a whole different strategy in terms of how people who understand themselves to be anti-colonial revolutionaries relate to the people. And, there are a whole lot of texts that people could look to get into that. Probably the most influential one is Mao Zedong's writings on guerrilla warfare. And those are really important because if you read the counterinsurgency manual, they're quite explicit in the fact that that manual was developed to counter Mao's strategy. And Mao's strategy was all about building organic relationships with the people who might not necessarily be ready to take up arms, but who would provide support for that movement, right? So counterinsurgency is to figure out who the militant hardcore are, who the actual revolutionaries are, to figure out who the people who support them are, to ensure that those two groups remain separate, to neutralize the revolutionaries. Neutralize is a euphemism for convert, capture, or kill. That's what neutralize means. It's one of those three things, often multiple of them. Neutralize the revolutionaries and then provide the masses with programming to secure and to facilitate their, if not allegiance, at least their acquiescence to the dominant authority, right? Give them some, neo-colonial crumbs, show them how violent the state can be to the actual revolutionaries so that they say, you know what, no, we don't want to get down with that.